Welcome everyone to the session on the role of the library in the age of online education. We're joined by Elizabeth Speer and Katie Prentice. Just a reminder that if you were looking for online examinations and testing, scroll to the top of the agenda and click on track 1. So our two speakers for today are Elizabeth, who is the Electronic Resources and Acquisitions Librarian for the Gibson D. Lewis Library at the University of North Texas Health Science Center at Fort Worth, and Katie, who is the Executive Director of the Texas Medical Center Library in Houston, Texas. The TMC Library reports to an independent governing board and draws its funding from 13 non-related academic, health, and research institutions. Both will bring tremendous experience in the evolving role of libraries and will be presenting a case study each before we go to the discussions phase. So over to you, Elizabeth and Katie.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here today. As Vistov said, I will be discussing a little bit about the role of libraries, specifically how having a roadmap for the future and how that allowed us to shift from face-to-face digital library offerings to students, explore the services and technology needs, reevaluate our mission and purpose, expand how we worked with all of our stakeholders, and adapt to our likely format moving forward post-COVID-19. HSC's roadmaps are very clearly defined. We consider those to be our campus emergency plan, our library emergency plan, our campus and library 5-year strategic plans, our mission statement for the library, our department OKRs, as well as our individual OKRs, all of our policy and procedure manuals, and then, of course, the university's core values. So prior to COVID, we actually began our shift from face-to-face to digital library offerings to students. Several years ago, we actually shifted from print to electronic being the preferred format for all purchases. Library staff are issued laptops on iPads rather than desktops so that we are truly mobile. The library also leases hotspots for students, faculty, and staff use. And we have a vibrant online Ask Us chat, email, and phone call service that we have implemented. Once COVID hit, we had 62 hotspots that were available. All of those were loaned out. Our phones were actually redirected and run through our computers so that we really truly had a mobile office wherever we went. And our Ask Us service exploded with COVID, with our chats increasing almost 1,200%, and our in-depth search requests increased 477%, which is an unheard of number for us. It seemed that our students actually preferred the online model as compared to the in-person model. We also had been exploring our service and technology needs through 3 different areas, both circulation, instruction, and technology needs. With circulation, we were evaluating our effectiveness of a traditional circulation desk. We were running usage data to determine what was being checked out. We were analyzing space needs. With our instruction, we had begun creating an online course catalog, and we were exploring using staff to handle some of our instructional tasks. And then with the technology, we were evaluating all of our library technical tools, including our catalog, our electronic resource management software, and all of our computer labs. And what we did was, during COVID, a lot of things changed. We reduced our staff by 9 temporary part-time positions. We added 1 additional full-time librarian position. We added 2 full-time staff positions, and we've asked for an additional 1 to 2 librarians and an additional 1 part-time post-COVID. With our instruction, we created 15 new online course catalog offerings, and we entirely rebuilt our course reserves in our new WMS ILS. So again, during COVID, probably not the best time to do this. We migrated from our previous catalog to OCLC WMS, which gave us an added discovery layer, allowed us to cancel our previous ERM software, We changed our online tool for course offerings. We purchased 30 laptops for a computer lab, which never got to go in a computer lab because COVID happened. So they actually got checked out to staff members across campus who traditionally had a desktop computer in their office. And then we also purchased an integrated locker system, which allowed us to do contactless checkout for the few remaining print items that we had. And through all of this, we were reevaluating our mission and purpose. We were asking a lot of questions. Who are we? What is our purpose? How do we fit in with the campus culture? What are our goals? Some of the more important questions really came down to what are we doing that really isn't our job or purpose? Why are we doing those things? How can we be more use across campus? And what do we do better than anyone else on campus? So by asking those questions and evaluating our thought process, we prioritized what best served our goals, and we learned to put some serious limitations on our partnerships across campus, which have served us and those departments better because we have more clear expectations. So we wanted to expand how we worked and work with all of our stakeholders. In order to do that, we had to know who our stakeholders were. So we did some research and we worked with our marketing department, and we found out exactly who it was that we were serving both internally and externally. We wanted to know how we could reach more people and do people actually know what the library can do for them? All of the questions that plague libraries throughout a normal semester, but seem to be really focused on during COVID. So we did a lot of changes. We revamped our website entirely. We edited and added new libguides. We got rid of libguides that were no longer relevant. We integrated our discovery layer. We utilized our daily university newsletter to where we were communicating across everyone on campus. We identified some key stakeholders within other departments that we use to help us disseminate information, because we found that people will respond to an email from someone they know within their department, whereas if we send out a mass blast, they're just going to ignore the library. And we really began to leverage our social media accounts to have some additional contact with students. So that led us to the adaptation of the likely format moving forward post-19. COVID-19 has changed everything. What it means for us is that we have a permanent, flexible, and remote scheduling option for staff. Personally, I am only in the office now 2 days a week, and I work remotely from home 3 days a week, which allows me to have a better work-life balance. We increased and will continue to increase the online library course offerings. We have begun cross-training people that traditionally may not have been thought of to do certain jobs in the library to increase our redundancies. We have made a commitment to add additional technology as soon as the need becomes evident, rather than taking a wait and see approach. For example, right now we are negotiating a contract with the self-checkout system. We've already integrated lockers, and we are evaluating our current interlibrary loan software. We are continuing to communicate more information to faculty by direct means rather than giant library blast emails, which were not effective. And we are evaluating our current job titles and roles to ensure that they fit the needs of the university and the library moving forward. But one of the things that we've really learned and that we have put into place is that we now understand more when to say no to opportunities and when we should say yes, because it's a better fit for what we need and what the university needs. So I know that was a lot of information really quickly, and it was really generalized, but I am available to answer questions later on should they arise. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm going to send that over to Katie Prentice.
Hello, thank you very much. I am also excited to be here. And, part of the adventure of telling these stories is that none of us were really sure what was going to happen. And I also have to be honest that I changed jobs in the middle of all of this. I only started here at the TMC Library in Houston, Texas in December. So I moved and joined the team here. So some of what happened before I got here is the newest, most recent history, and others are parts of our process that we know moving forward right now. So what's weird about the TMC library is, unlike most university libraries, we don't belong to a university. We are fully independent. And in the United States, that would be a 501c3 nonprofit, but we're a non-governmental organization, which means that we have our network and our member institutions, but we don't belong to them institutionally, which makes for adventure in all of our planning. It just adds some complexity to our story. But as part of our process over the last several years, we were planning a major renovation. This library has been in this building since the early 1950s. The organization itself is a bit older than that even. And so as this renovation approached, this was in progress before the pandemic began. And most of our physical book collection had moved to a joint storage facility out of town that gives us access through a courier and interlibrary loan service. We were already scheduled for temporary building closures. And so we were actually able to keep construction going during the peaks in the pandemic, where it was safer for us to close the building for our staff and for our students. And so, and actually that balanced out nicely, and the whole project was able to be completed a little earlier than expected. As part of that planning, though, we were already prepared with all of our staff, and having everyone had a Surface computer. Our office phones were already part of our portable setup in their system. We didn't need to be in our offices to answer our phones, because we were all moving around as they did renovations in different parts of the building. So we were weirdly prepared in that area. And to think back and say, well, somehow we were more ready, it was luck, I think, that the renovation of our space coincided with the needing to close down to keep our staff safer. We reopened in late fall to regular use. We still have limited hours so that we can spread out our staff, and much of our team is working from home completely or hybrid. What happened the fastest in the change during the pandemic is we immediately changed classes, consultations, office hours, which had been happening in the different locations around the Texas Medical Center, all moved to Zoom. We will meet with you anywhere you are. And that's how our team was ready to go. Because part of our contract is we provide office hours. And up until this pandemic, those were always in person. Our interlibrary loan team kept going. They kept lending books and articles, really meeting people's needs to see where they were. At my old institution, we actually could tell, because we also continued to do interlibrary loan, we could actually see use of some older articles about viruses and virus transmissions that we had access to in paper that some libraries couldn't get to because they weren't open. We were able to provide those. And so seeing that impact on care was really it felt good that we were able to contribute to the research that was being done globally. Our library staff here at the TMC Library, we have been able to maintain our services in person and remotely. And our teams have really, I think they've really excelled and shown what is possible through all of this. One of the important details to me that happened here is that libraries in the last couple of years had made a huge effort toward library as a space, and this cool, amazing, we have growth, we've got things to see. And then with this, we were able to separate the building from our services. They were no longer connected. And one of the coolest things that I noticed in the TMC Library's sort of statistics about our reference, similar to what Elizabeth saw, is that in that same period, those two falls, that sort of before the pandemic and then peak, you can see that we were having people coming in, they were visiting us, they were very much using email and then chat. But then in that same period, the following year, email and chat turned out to be the huge use of our services, which was kind of interesting. And yet email stuck right in there at 41%. It's kind of funny. I'm guessing email users are just going to keep using email. In our collection itself, an interesting note in the budget is that we actually in the prior year had actually added quite a few new resources. And part of that was actually a switch. I guess the biggest bulk of that was a switch from one big database to another big database. But in the following year, it was a much smaller number. And part of that had to do with our overall funding and the way our partnerships work with our institutions, because they were expecting less funding. So did we. Where we're at now is that as we see our space, the renovation is complete, we're working on some final things. We are looking forward to the day when we put all of the chairs back and we stop, worrying about people getting too close together. We are going to continue to be where our students, faculty, and staff are. And if that's in remote with Zoom, we're going to do that. And then as they go back in person, we will do that too. And we've really separated the services. The building is no longer an integral part of reference. Our librarians can give their expertise and their subject matter support from anywhere they are. And we've really seen increases in some of our services like a systematic review and literature search requests. Those are wildly popular now, almost exponential, and that scares me a little because I don't know what's coming. So thank you very much. We'll all be happy to answer questions now.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Katie, for some very, very interesting case studies. So a general question just to set the stage, if you will, if you could go back to 2019 and prepare for the pandemic's impact on your library, how would you prepare? What would you have done differently? So
Katie,
maybe we'll
go
start with
ahead.
Katie.
Oh, sure. I know we're both staring at each other. So the best part of that question, thinking about, first of all, how awful the pandemic has been globally and continues to be in some areas, thinking back to like what I wish I had known is I wish I could have, given everybody like training in wellness, breathing, stress relief, that maybe came a little later where I'm, as a leader and a manager trying to remind my team to take a break. Just because you're working from home doesn't mean you have to work a bazillion hours. And I think in the beginning, where we were all so stressed out, there was a lot of internal pressure and maybe some external pressure to be present and ready all the time. And I think that was too much. So I think if I could go back, I would remind everybody to take a vacation, even if they just had to go to the park by their house. And that seems weird to say that now, but I think most of us didn't take any time off because we were so intent on we're going to help people and be there. Elizabeth?
Yeah, we were strangely, Katie, you said that you got lucky. And we very much also got lucky because we were already in the process of doing these migrations, which ended up putting us in a beautiful position for this horrible thing that happened. But I don't know that it was all luck. I think that what I would have liked to have seen happen was more communication with some other departments about why the changes we were making were so important. I don't think everyone understood why we wanted electronic resources rather than print. There was a real push for that. People are very upset to see books leave a library, not realizing that they haven't left. They've just gone to another shelving location in the cloud. So I don't think our communication was as strong as it could have been with other departments. So I would really like to have seen that. But in the end, the things that we had in place and the things that we were moving towards ended up coming about very quickly, much more quickly than I think they ever would have. And it made us extremely successful in what we did. And people do now have a much better understanding of what the library can do for them and with them, I think, than they did before. So I hate to say that COVID was a positive thing ever because it's horrible. But for us in the understanding, it was really a good thing in the end for what we do.
So in the shift online, what, if anything, was lost for the library staff, for the students, for the faculty, for the relationships between the different groups? Maybe start with you, Elizabeth.
So what was lost? We lost that personal contact with some of our departments, not so much with the library staff. We were extremely good about having departmental meetings and one-on-one meetings through Teams and Zoom. I mean, we had after hours get-togethers where it was nothing for work. It was just social so that we maintained those connections so that we worked as closely together remotely as we did in person. But some of those other departmental connections, the people that you only see once every few months, Unless we were immediately needed and it was an emergency, there was kind of a disconnect there. Of course, we did also lose 9 temporary part-time positions, but that honestly was in the works beforehand. We were already evaluating whether that staffing was effective for what we did. But now that we're back, there's a little bit of a disconnect in how that non-traditional service model is going to look now without those people and without a service desk. And so again, we're having some communication issues and explaining what that is. And so we've got some communication that we're going to have to do, that we've lost the connections because a lot of people also left or retired during the pandemic. So we lost, the person that was always our go-to at the department, in TCOM is now gone. So we have to find a new go-to person that we have to start all over building those relationships. So that's where we're finding the most difficulty.
Well, what about Katie?
I think similarly, perhaps the serendipitous moments, like for me, starting this job, I probably would have walked all over the medical center, or driven to the farther locations or ridden the shuttle and met people, talked to people. And I had to be very intentional to meet people. You have to make an appointment, set up your Zoom link. And so I've missed standing in the coffee line at the cafeteria, or bumping into somebody in the hallway. And I think that happened both on the micro level in the library, where our teams haven't been able to stand in the hallway and talk about some cool idea they had and work through it. So we've lost a little bit of the serendipity, and we're talking about how do we bring that back, how do we get that as part of our moving forward with everything we've learned. And so we're planning for, even with the hybrid schedules, to intentionally overlap. And we're continuing to reflect on what was lost and what we gained and learned. We're planning to keep our robust cleaning procedures, which is kind of novel. So yay, cleaner library forever. And I think that'll be a plus of something we've learned.
So the pandemic has been horrific, but you mentioned that there were some positives that came out of it. So was there anything important that you feel that was gained that you might not have had a chance to do otherwise? Elizabeth?
Our university has always had sort of a flexible scheduling policy, but what they meant by flexible scheduling at that time was, okay, you don't want to work 8 to 5, you want to come in and work 7:30 to 4:30, that's fine. Now that entire mindset has changed, and we're becoming much more modern with our thinking about what it means to be an employee at the university. And so now, like I said, I come in on Tuesdays and Fridays normally. And we are very intentional about who's in when and overlap. But we also have flexibility in our Tuesday, Friday schedule. I can come in Monday, Thursday if it means that my child has a doctor's appointment on Friday. And so the ability to work so that you can live instead of live to work has been a really amazing change that this has brought out. And I think that another thing that has been really great is library staff has a better understanding of what their coworkers do. A lot of times in the library world, we're very segmented in what we do. You have the cataloger and that's what they do, and no one else understands anything about cataloging. For my position with e-resources, most of the people that work with me don't have any idea how I troubleshoot in e-resource. They don't understand how things get turned on. They don't really understand what I do. And because of this, and because we've had to work so closely with each other and we've had to communicate more often with each other about what it is that we're doing and the processes of things, and because migrations happened, we now have a much better understanding of how we each fit into the role of the library as a whole. And I don't know that we would have ever gotten that without this situation. So it's been refreshing and really eye-opening.
You, Katie?
I think for us, we're experiencing similar developments and gains, but I think the added layer of flexibility of these technologies like Zoom and Teams, now like a research group that's global can say, hey, can we get a librarian at, it's 7 a.m., Central Time here in the US, but they can get everybody together much more easily and comfortably than before. I mean, sure, we'd all love to hop on a plane and go somewhere, but how often did that actually happen? And so now when somebody's scheduling a meeting and they say, well, we need a librarian, we can figure out who's available and they don't have to be in the office. And we can provide that service and that consultation that they're looking for without it feeling like a hassle. I was speaking this week to someone who organizes training for the 800 postdocs in her organization. And I said, well, what are you thinking for the future? Are you going to go back to the before times method of like monthly meetings? And she said, never. She's hoping to occasionally have social get-togethers, but they're going to continue offering their training and career development services through Zoom because it allows people to actually come together. And she's like, and we'd love to invite a librarian now more often. And I was like, awesome that we can use this technology that has become almost natural. I'm not going to say this is normal. It's we can now use it for us instead of feeling uncomfortable like we all did 2 years ago when we were summoned to a meeting and we're all still learning to use the mute button, but we'll get there.
So Katie, continuing in that vein, you'd mentioned that you have librarians who do training. Obviously, there's some librarians who teach as well. So what level of support was given to these librarians as they moved their teaching and their training online? And who provided that support to them?
Oh, that's a great question. It's hard to say exactly. We even in this period onboarded a new librarian. We hired someone last summer, and she started a couple months before I arrived here. Our training process in most libraries is usually done internally. We collect videos or we make our own. We sit down with somebody. Obviously, sitting down stopped being possible together, because of pandemic protocols. But here at the TMC and at my previous organization, we did a lot of one-on-one Zoom sessions, a lot of conversations with people to make sure they were comfortable. We practiced, like if we were going to do an online event, we got 3 or 4 of our staff together to rehearse the parts, similar to what has happened with this event online. And for anything we were teaching or changing, we had to be extra intentional, make sure we offered more than one moment to learn, and recorded it so they could view it later. Whereas I think, in the past, we might have scheduled 1 or 2 in person and then somebody would be around if they needed help. And now there's no around. So we have had to be very intentional about training. For me, lots of meeting scheduling, learning about how things work in my new building. And I've come in, I think, a lot more than has been required, mostly because I wanted to learn about what's happening here and get to know the people who are our providers and workers in the areas around the library too. But I think it's definitely been a learning experience, whereas I think health science libraries never considered that people could work remotely. He was like, well, we will be in person. It was a very in-person ethic. And now it's like, oh, look at all these things we can do from anywhere. So it's been a huge cultural shift, both on the local level and national. And I'm hoping we can keep some of that going and realize that we can be dynamic organizations from anywhere.
So looking to the future, what long-term effects do you think will happen because of the shift in your library, and then for Elizabeth in her library as well?
Oh, in the long term, I'm seeing the continued flexibility of both how and where and when we offer services, as well as a I guess the continued separation of the building, like I can offer reference from anywhere, it doesn't have to be here. And that our students who have, and our faculty and staff who have lives and families appreciate that we don't need a captive person sitting at the reference desk to meet their needs. And that is, as Elizabeth said, communication and awareness of what's available. But I'm excited to see that grow and continue. And I'm hoping this means that we can continue to grow, even though it's sort of hard to see from the outside.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I don't think that we are ever going back to what we had. I know that we are not going to have a traditional service desk, and that is really blowing people's minds. They don't understand what a library is without their reference desk. But the truth of the matter is, no one was using our reference desk. They were using it to come in and get headphones or a laptop stand, but they weren't actually getting reference services there. If they wanted that, they were contacting us by chat or email. They weren't using the desk as it was designed. Um, so, we are advancing, we're adding in additional technologies. We're getting a self-checkout system. We are adapting our building to serve the future rather than trying to hoard our space. We're looking at sharing offices so that the space that is available is more effectively utilized. We have a locker system. We did change to a new ILS, which is a hosted system so that we didn't have to download any kind of clients, and it made it easier for us to troubleshoot anywhere. I literally can be on the beach and log in and fix a link. I don't have to be sitting at this desk. As much as I love this desk and I really appreciate my office, I don't have to be there, and yet I can still be as effective as if I am here. It's really changed, I think, how our administration at least views the library. They do, we have a whole nother level of respect because of the level of work that we have managed to do over this last year, how we've managed to integrate new online tools. We purchase software that makes creating our online courses better. We integrated a discovery layer so that not only does it make it easier on my students to find what they want, but I ended up saving a lot of money, and finances are important when things like this go on. So, as effective as we were before all of this, when we were in person, you saw the numbers. Our numbers went up 1,200%. That's insane. And no one would have been able to guess that. But remote and having that life balance, we were not only more effective, but our staff was happier. We're going through this horrible thing, and everyone was happier and more pleased with where they worked. And I don't think you can't buy that.
So Elizabeth, you mentioned the change that has already taken place in the reference desk. In the upcoming fall terms and even in summer, as we start moving out of the pandemic, are you expecting more changes? And are there things that you will be restoring as well? What's the balance between the new mode of going completely flexible and online with the physical mode that some people still want?
Well, we did have people complain that they really needed to get in the library because they have to study in that space. And I understand that, because anyone who has children at home or dogs at home, they know what a distraction all of that can be, and it can make studying extremely difficult. We have reopened the building. We do have social distancing in place, but we're actually redoing a floor in the coming year to make it more accessible and user-friendly. We, like I said, we're moving what remains of our print collection, it's very small, into a centralized location to where people can help themselves. We're not ever going to bring back that traditional model. Our consultations are most likely going to remain virtual. Students do have the option of coming in and meeting with the librarian during their time in. And we will be doing a few in-person reference sessions with people, but even those are being held by Zoom. And I think that's going to continue because we really have seen an increase in, like Katie said, the flexibility aspect, and more people attend when we provide services virtually. So we're still trying to find our balance and figure out what is going to work for us. But there are some things that they're just gone for good. And I think here in a couple of years, people won't even remember. If you'd asked people 20 years ago about ebooks, they were a fad and they were not going to stay, and nobody wanted to use them because if you made the font bigger initially, your page numbers would change. And so we've worked all that out, and ebooks are preferred now. Matter of fact, I haven't bought a single print item in over a year.
What about
We
you, Katie?
I think as we look toward the fall, one of the things that in our plans as our phases of, as our partners come back to what they're establishing as their new world order, we are planning to restore our hours to what they actually were before, because we still have the staff to do that. Because we, for security reasons where we are, we can't be overnight unless we hired staff or security for that. So our space is never going to be available 24 hours. Never say never though, but as part of we'll restore our hours for our community, then we will allow the members of the public back in, because while we were distancing, we were limited to only the students, faculty, and staff affiliates, basically, because we weren't sure we could guarantee them enough space, and they're the ones who pay for our services. So after restoring our hours, we'll make sure our procedures are good, and then we will allow the public back in according to our standard policies. So we know that's coming back. But from what comes after that, we're anticipating our staff will work a hybrid schedule. We'll see each other. I'm hoping that as a community, we can restore, some of those community activities that were enjoyed by our team before. But there are things probably that won't come back. Weirdly, we have bought some physical items, and we're actually going to be buying a few more. And actually, next week, we will get a shipment from our local public library. They're going to give us lend us a browsing collection that then we can issue library cards for, so that we don't have to buy things like novels or cookbooks or children's books for the people in the medical center area. They can come and get this public library experience in a small collection of being able to check out books, because we have seen nationwide here in the US, the use of libraries during this pandemic, even though many of them have not been open with curbside and checkout or special reserve times, has been phenomenal. And so we're planning that especially as the institutions around us come back to work, they can then pick up books with us from the public library without having to drive into another stop on their way home on their commute. So we're adding that new option for services that actually it's sort of a renewed service, because we had this option about 5 years ago with our local public library, and after a hurricane and damage to our building and several of theirs, we gave them their books back because they needed them in their spaces. And so now we're getting a new collection, and we're really excited to share it with our community. So I'm seeing there will be change, will continue to be constant.
We're coming close to the end, but I wanted to ask one final question of both of you. What is the biggest takeaway that you have from the last year that you think will impact the future of libraries in general moving forward? If you were to put on your thinking caps and say 10 years in the future, how did this 1 year change everything? Maybe start with Elizabeth and then with Katie.
Oh gosh. I think that I have always been a big proponent of electronic resources. I mean, it's what I do. And so of course everyone loves what they do. I don't think print is dead, but I think that we have proven more than ever that we need to work with publishers to make all types of materials available electronically, because currently that's one of the reasons that we do maintain some print items, is because those items just aren't available. Publishers have an embargo. They don't allow us to purchase those as a library. And that's really not feasible or usable with us. But I think this flexibility is absolutely here to stay. And I think that people are going to be more adaptable to change because of this last year. And I think that's going to be a really wonderful thing, because change is scary. And every library I've ever worked in before here, the words, "but we've always done it this way," have come out of people's mouths repeatedly. And in the last year, anytime someone went, "but they would stop and go, "Wait, nothing that we've done previously is still going to work. So I think it's allowed us to be more visionary in where we want to be and what we want to do and how we want to enact things. And people are going to be more willing to listen to the ideas and not automatically go, but that's not how we do things. So I think that's going to be a really positive change moving forward.
Fabulous. Katie, last words.
Oh, that's no pressure. I think for me, the biggest thing that I'm seeing is that forever in higher education, our libraries were these temples of books. And the pandemic has put a hard break in that use. And I know many places continue to stay open, but for a lot of us and what students are expecting, the library is no longer just the building. It's like no longer, when you think of us, we are this services, we're these online materials. And in some ways we've made it so easy, they just click through, they don't even realize the library made it magic for them. So we've made it so easy, we've erased ourselves. But I think that that's okay. You know, they should know that, you know, they paid for it, so we paid for it. But the building is no longer just the library. The building is part of us, and it's where you can come to study, to get away, but it's no longer our core reason for existence. Because it's these services and resources that we've made so flexible for them moving forward. And I expect that to continue to grow.